At a California university, a team of scientists led by Zoe and Frank is conducting experiments to bring living beings back to life. One day, a student named Eva joins them to document the research process. Nico and Clay explain to her that they've developed a serum codenamed Lazarus, which is supposed to trigger neural activity after death and, in theory, bring people back to life. Frank explains that the serum was originally developed to help coma patients maintain neural activity, but now it's being used to revive the dead. The team is gearing up for a new experiment, and everyone's on edge because their recent tests haven't gone so well, to put it mildly. Nico tries to cheer Zoe up, as he has a soft spot for her, even though she's in a relationship with Frank. What's more, it's been almost 3 years since Zoe and Frank got engaged, but they had to postpone the wedding because the university greenlit their research. Frank threw himself into the work, barely paying attention to the wedding or anything outside the project. One night, Zoe has a nightmare about a burning apartment building where several people die. The next day, the team conducts an experiment on a dead blind dog named Rocky. They inject the serum, which at first shows no results, but then Eva notices the dog's ears twitching. Nico examines Rocky and sadly says the experiment failed, but suddenly a miracle happens, and the dog comes back to life. The team calms Rocky down, and Zoe checks him out, noticing that his blindness is gone. Frank warns everyone that what happened in the lab stays in the lab, so they can't tell anyone about it. Back at home, the scientists notice Rocky seems depressed and refuses to eat. Zoe worries about him, even questioning their research, but Frank reassures his fiancée that if they succeed, they'll save countless lives, so she shouldn't overthink it. Later, while Zoe sleeps, her bedroom door suddenly opens, and Rocky climbs onto the bed, staring at her intensely. The next day at the lab, the rest of the team also notices the dog acting completely emotionless. They run a CT scan on Rocky and see that the serum is still active, even though it should have worn off within hours. After that, weird things start happening, and Rocky suddenly turns aggressive, but some of the team pretend nothing's wrong. The next day, the university bosses summon Frank and chew him out for the experiments, accusing him and his team of playing God. Meanwhile, investors show up at the lab and seize all the equipment and the team's research. Zoe blames Eva, thinking she snitched to the administration since the trouble started after she joined. But Frank believes Eva's innocent and that someone's just trying to steal their success. So, the team sneaks back into the lab at night to recreate the experiment. They want to prove they're the ones who developed the Lazarus Project. Nico hacks the security system to buy time, while Clay brings in another dog's corpse. When everything's ready for the experiment, Zoe flips the switch, but she gets electrocuted and dies instantly. The team tries to revive her, but every attempt fails. Later, Frank realizes Zoe was shocked because of the engagement ring he gave her 3 years ago. Unwilling to accept his loved one's death, Frank lays Zoe's body on the table, hoping to bring her back. At first, the others refuse to help, but when Frank takes full responsibility, the team agrees to assist. Soon, Frank injects Zoe with the serum, but she doesn't respond. Just then, Nico spots a security guard approaching, so the team turns off the lights and hides. After the guard leaves, they're shocked to see Zoe sitting up on the table. She immediately realizes she died, but was brought back by her friends. Frank comforts her, tending to a wound on her head, while the others, still stunned, marvel at how they managed to revive her. Soon, the team discovers that Zoe's brain is showing unusually high neural activity. Almost 20% of her brain is active compared to the usual 10% in humans. Nico starts to worry, unsure what'll happen if her brain activity increases beyond 20%. Meanwhile, Frank keeps calming Zoe, but she suddenly starts hearing his thoughts and realizes something's wrong with her. When Frank steps away, Zoe, left alone, notices she can move objects with her mind. A little later, she sees that her fingers and the injection site have darkened. She goes to Frank, saying she feels strange, like she's trapped in a burning building she can't escape. They give her a sedative to help her sleep and rest. Later, Eva notices Zoe's eyes moving, and when she leaves the room, she suddenly finds herself in a burning building. There, she sees a little girl, and a burned hand grabs her wrist. Eva wakes up in the lab and tells the others what happened. When they notice a burn mark on her arm, they demand answers from Frank. It turns out that as a child, Zoe survived a fire in her building where her neighbors died, and she's had nightmares about it almost every night since. At that moment, Zoe wakes up with pitch-black eyes. While Clay treats Eva's burn, Nico works alone. Suddenly, Zoe appears, begging him to help her understand what's wrong with her, trying to manipulate him with a kiss. Nico rejects her, and she says she spent her whole life trying to fix one mistake, but ended up in hell anyway. Then the lights go out, and Zoe vanishes. A supernatural force suddenly pulls Nico into a metal cabinet. Zoe reappears, and, with a single look, crushes the cabinet, killing him inside. When the others return, they ask about Nico, but Zoe calmly says she has no idea where he is. Suddenly, the power cuts out again, and while Clay and Frank figure out how to escape the lab, Zoe starts taunting Eva. Soon the team realizes Zoe's involved in Nico's disappearance. When Clay yells at her, Zoe uses her powers to choke him with his e-cigarette. Frank and Eva try to save him, but it's too late. When they turn to Zoe, she looks like a completely different person. The lights go out again, and Zoe disappears, only to reappear and attack her friends. Frank finally realizes he made a mistake and gives Eva a syringe to stop Zoe. They split up, but Frank finds Zoe first. He tells her he still loves her, forgetting she can read minds and knows he plans to harm her. Enraged, Zoe grabs his head and snaps his neck instantly. Seeing this, Eva runs but soon finds herself back in the burning building. There, she encounters the little girl again and realizes it's young Zoe. The girl shows her matches, revealing that Zoe caused the fire that killed her neighbors. Eva tries to convince her she's not to blame and can still make things right. Then adult Zoe appears and starts approaching. At that moment, the little girl opens a door emitting white light. Eva manages to inject Zoe with the syringe, and Zoe, apologizing, collapses unconscious. Eva gives her another injection, and Zoe seems to die for good. Seconds later, firefighters arrive at the lab. One of them approaches Eva to comfort her. Just then, Eva notices Zoe's body is gone. She turns to the firefighter but comes face to face with Zoe, who kills her instantly. Zoe then brings her friends' bodies back to the lab. She lays Frank on the table and injects him with a serum made from her own flesh, bringing him back to life, and that's where the movie ends. And that's the Lazarus Effect for you. Honestly, this movie leaves a weird aftertaste. On one hand, the idea of resurrection and what happens to someone afterward is really intriguing, especially the scenes where Zoe starts doing creepy stuff. Olivia Wilde totally delivers. Her performance carries the film, and Donald Glover adds some life to it too. The mix of sci-fi and horror hooks you while you're waiting to see what's next. But to be real, it sometimes slips into generic horror cliches, like you're watching something you've seen 100 times before. The plot drags in places, and the ending lacks the punch to make you go, wow. Overall, it's a mixed bag. Kinda interesting, but missing something to make it truly memorable. If you're into light horror with questions about life and death, it's worth a watch, but don't expect a masterpiece. I'd give it a 6 out of 10. Decent, but not mind-blowing.